Howdy and welcome to week 4. You might remember a couple weeks ago when Tommy read the lists of the best and worst topics for conversation and discussion. Well, on that list, the very first worst topic to talk about was finances. So, welcome to small group. Today, we're going to talk about money. Now, we're not doing that to make you feel awkward or to make me feel awkward talking to you about money today. Instead, we're talking about money today because Jesus talked about money. He talked about money a lot. So our hope is to step into that conversation with him and also with his spirit to guide us and to teach us all that he wants us to know. But before we do that, I want to start with a game. I'm going to read some sayings about money, and I want you to see if you can identify whether it comes from the Bible or culture. After I read each one, you'll either say Bible if you think it's in the Bible, or you'll say culture if you think it's not in the Bible. So, here we go. Are you ready? Cash is king. Now, it's unclear where this phrase originated, but it certainly wasn't in the Bible. We do know that this was popularized in 1987 by the CEO of Volvo. How about this one? The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. That one is in the Bible. It's found in 1 Timothy 6:10. Here's another one. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. That's also in the Bible. King Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, wrote that in Ecclesiastes 5:10. How about this one? A fool and his money are soon parted. That sounds biblical. It sounds like it's from something like Proverbs, right? But it's actually not. It was written by a guy named Thomas Tusser in his 16th century work called 500 Points of Good Husbandry. How about this one? Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Yeah, Jesus said that. You can find that in Luke 12:15. Okay, one more. Having money is not everything. Not having it is. You can thank Kanye West for that nugget of wisdom. Now, you might be wondering, what's the point of the exercise? Well, the point is that for a topic that we don't like to talk about a lot, this is talked about a lot. It's sung about and rapped about in songs. It forms the plot and is even the title of many movies or Netflix series. We have money on our minds, and God knows that about us. That's why in one of Jesus' most famous sermons, he talks about money. He said that we should be generous with people in need and that we shouldn't make a big deal out of it or let anybody know whenever we're being generous. He said that we shouldn't focus our attention on earthly treasures like big houses and nice cars and clothes and shoes and even the iPhones that we carry around, because none of that stuff lasts. And when our hearts are fixed in the direction of accumulating earthly wealth, our hearts won't be right with God. That's because it's impossible to serve both God and money. He said we shouldn't worry about those physical things because life is more than that. And God always provides what we need. Instead of seeking an earthly kingdom with earthly possessions, we should seek his kingdom and his righteousness. That's where the real treasure is. Jesus often spoke about money in the form of parables. Out of the 40 or so parables that he told, nearly half of them speak directly about money. And many of the other parables that he told relate to material wealth. You see, money is an important aspect of life, and Jesus knows that. He knows that you need money to pay your electric bill and to put gas in your car so you can get to work. He knows that you need money for college or trade school. He even knows that you need money for retirement. And he also knows that because you need money, it's easy to lose proper focus on money. It's easy to forget that God provides all your needs, or maybe to doubt that God will provide your needs. It's easy to worry that you won't have enough money. It's easy to get caught up in the stuff you want or the stuff you want to give those you love. That's why 1 Timothy 6:10 reminds us that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. For today, let's read 2 of Jesus' parables, starting in Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. Jesus says this. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. then in his joy goes and sells all he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls who, on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. You see, both parables are only about money in their subplots. The main plot is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus used material wealth to teach us why we should give to the needy, lay up treasures in heaven instead of on the earth, and not worry about material things. Because the kingdom of heaven, that is the kingdom that's incorruptible. It's the greatest reward. We don't know how much the man in the field or the merchant had, because that's not the point of the parable. It doesn't matter if you have great wealth or no wealth. The parables have the same message. These two people in the parables gave it all up. They gave up their homes, they gave up their possessions, they gave up their trade tools, and maybe even sentimental keepsakes. If they just built a brand new addition onto their house or maybe an outdoor kitchen, it went. Everything went. And not only did everything go, everything went with joy. Now, this seems sort of ironic, doesn't it? I mean, we tend to think of giving up things as sacrifice. And I don't know about you, but the word sacrifice for me doesn't tend to stir up joy in my heart. What it usually stirs up in me is drudgery, right? We think, I have to give this up, not I get to give this up. But here in the parables, we see the attitude was, I get to. Clearly, Jesus wants us to take a close look at the contrasting realities of the two treasures that we struggle to prioritize well, the kingdom of earth and the kingdom of heaven. He wants to talk about this. These aren't just stories of vague ideology. Jesus lived this out. And when a rich young ruler who was a really good guy wanted to know how he could get to heaven, Jesus didn't tell stories. He spoke those parables in regular language, and he said to this guy, he said, go, sell what you possess and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come and follow me. You see, the rich man, he wasn't like the guy in the parable who found treasure in a field, or the merchant who sold everything for one pearl of great value. Instead, he left Jesus feeling discouraged. He wasn't willing to go that far. You see, if we're honest, we might be thinking that the rich young man had a point. Think about it. If Jesus showed up in the flesh at Second this weekend and told us all to sell everything and give it all to the poor and to follow him, I don't know if the room would be as full the following week. It's a hard teaching. Would we say yes to that? Would we give up everything to follow Jesus? Maybe a more difficult question, are we giving up anything to follow Jesus? As we consider those questions, we need to understand this. Jesus wasn't suggesting that money or worldly possessions are evil and that we should never have them. He wasn't saying that it's not okay to have money or it's not okay to have a house or drive a nice car. But what he was saying was that nothing is valuable enough to keep us from giving it away for his sake. So as we consider questions like, would I give up everything to follow Jesus? Maybe a good follow-up question is, are there things in my life that if faced with the same decision would make me walk away from Jesus sad and also say no to him because I'm not willing to give them up? You see, if we're seeking God's kingdom first, and that's what Christianity is, then it follows that we would be willing to give up everything for that kingdom, for the sake of knowing Jesus and for the sake of making him known. That's why Paul wrote this in Philippians 3, verses 7 and 8. He said, whatever gain I had, I count as a loss for the sake of knowing Christ. Indeed, I count everything as a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. Whatever we lose for the sake of knowing and following Christ, it's not a loss. It's the ultimate gain. There's no greater treasure than Christ himself. And when we truly believe in our hearts, that also informs our attitudes and our minds about money, about giving generously, about what we treasure and pursue most in life, and even about what we worry about. So, how do we apply Jesus' teachings on money? That's what we're going to talk about in our discussion today. As we do, don't make your end goal giving generously in secret, laying up treasures in heaven, serving God, not money, or even being anxious about tomorrow. As we do, don't make the end goal about giving generously in secret, or laying up treasures in heaven, or serving God and not money, or even not being anxious about tomorrow. You can pay for the person's meal behind you at the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A tomorrow, and that'd be a great thing. You can choose to buy a used car instead of a brand new one and give the difference to help fund a ministry here at Second, and man, that'd be great. You could even memorize Matthew 6:34. Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious of itself. Sufficient is the day for its own trouble. And you can repeat that over and over and over again every time you feel anxious. And man, that would be valuable. But as nice and good as those things are, they're not the end goal. They're not the aim that we're to be focused on. Jesus doesn't want our takeaway to be that we check off a few good deeds off a list and then we carry on as usual. He wants us to treasure, to really treasure his kingdom, not the one that we're so easily wrapped up with here and now. So let's talk about money. How do we know we're treasuring his kingdom? We'll unpack that more this week, but it starts with developing a generous heart, with holding things loosely and trusting Jesus for his provision, even when we don't have a lot by the world's standards.